So we're doing wedding horror stories, my top 5.
My darling, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you.
All right, so in no particular order, the following are the horror stories that I have seen either as a wedding photographer, a wedding planner, or a venue owner, or even a guest at a wedding. So there was this one time when the makeup artist turned up drunk as a skunk drunk. And basically the venue staff had to get her arrested because she had driven to the venue and she was like super drunk. I don't even know if I should be sharing this story. I'm not really going to judge her. I know I'm judging. I'm proper judging. But obviously there were circumstances that led to her drinking all night and then turning up at the venue, passing out in the car park, and she'd driven an hour to get to the venue. And basically we had to spend like the next 45 minutes calling around different hair and makeup artists, because she was supposed to do both hair and makeup, to organize someone to come and replace her. And obviously had to tell the couple and all the guests that she was feeling very poorly. We also called the police and had her arrested. The moral of the story is do not get drunk and drive. She's actually so lucky she didn't hurt anyone. But yes, the next horror story that I saw, which will probably be the one that haunts me the most for my whole wedding career, and it is the one reason why, like, the second thing someone has to do after they pay the deposit at one of my venues is provide evidence that they have hired or booked, the registrar. I was photographing a wedding. It was about 10 years ago. And I walked into the room where the ceremony was supposed to take place at about 1:45. And the ceremony was at 2:00. And I walked in because I was a bit like, oh, seems like we're a bit behind. I just wanted to check what was going on. And I walked into the end of a conversation where the father of the bride said, I quote, "How was I supposed to know I was supposed to book the registrar?" At which point I went, oh my God, what are we going to do? And somehow the communication between the venue and the father, who had booked everything for his princess beautiful daughter, had fallen apart. And the father had not realized he was supposed to book the registrars, and he'd called the venue to say, do we need to bring passports or something to the registrars on the day, and they had not picked up that he had not understood that they were supposed to book it. Basically, what we did was the venue wedding coordinator was amazing and actually got hold of the registrar, and I remember it was an Easter Sunday, and it was the Sunday where the clocks changed. She got hold of the registrar, explained what had happened. The registrar was out at Sunday lunch with her family, and she came to the venue, and I think she was like an hour late, obviously, because she didn't know she was supposed to come. And we faked the whole wedding. So no one knew, but we didn't quite get our stories straight. So we had gone and told all the guests that the registrar had forgot to change her clock, and so she was an hour late and had like forgotten that the clocks had gone back. And the registrar then thought she'd take it upon herself to explain to the guests that the bride had taken like an extra hour to get ready, and that's why the whole ceremony was running late. Everyone kind of was a bit confused, but we coasted over it. And when it came to the point of signing the registrar, the couple luckily had a big floral arrangement, and they went and sat behind it, and they both signed a piece of paper. Now, legally in the UK, you have to give 29 days notice or 30 days notice, basically a month's notice. So in order to get married, you have to give notice at the registry office or with the church. So obviously the couple had not done this. So they then later had to give notice, wait, and they then went and had a weekend at the venue at the cost of the venue, because the venue were really good about it, went and said their vows again with the registrar correctly this time. And yeah, that was horror story number 2. Moral of the story is book the registrar. Horror story number 3 is one that happened to me. The first part is not the horror story, or it may sound like the horror story, but an elderly relative had fallen over, and the thing that you find often at weddings with elderly relatives is they're on blood thinners. And if they do have any kind of stumble, fall, knock, etc., it can be quite dramatic and there can be lots of blood. And this lovely, lovely great uncle, really nice guy, he took a little bit of a fall and he cut his leg open, I think. Anyway, there was blood everywhere. It was outside and it looked really, really bad. Priority obviously was to make sure he was okay. We got it all bandaged up, first aided. We actually did get him taken to hospital just to get it checked out. He ended up being fine and that was all very well looked after. However, what happened was we were outside. This all happened in the evening. We had to get the blood off the staircase because it had gone all over the stone staircase. So we were like scrubbing it away, trying to get rid of it. And then all of a sudden, like to the left of me, I hear this noise and I'm like, oh my God, someone else has fallen over. And I see these feet coming out the bush. And I go running towards being like, oh my God, are you okay? To suddenly realize that person was two people and they had not fallen over. And they were having a great time in the bush. At which point I was like, so sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, please carry on. And I ran in the other direction. About 5 minutes later, they sheepishly walked past me. So that was an interesting moment. Horror story number 4, the bride that would not walk down the aisle. So I had this bride once. She was super nervous about walking down the aisle, and it was a church wedding. And she had told me that she was super nervous about walking down the aisle. You know, I didn't really take it seriously. You hear it all the time, and I was just like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, you're going to be fine. Anyways, she had a walk of about 5 minutes from her house to the church. It was super close by. We got her ready. She was good to go. Everything was fine. And she was like, I'm a little bit nervous. We got to outside the church and she started to shake. And she was like, I'm really nervous. And I was like, okay, it's going to be fine. And then I looked at her and all the color had drained out of her face. And I was like, oh my God, she's going to faint. There was nowhere for her to sit down. She's obviously in this incredible big white dress, and it was quite a big white dress. What I had to do was get one of the groomsmen to like sort of go down on the floor on all fours so she could sit on him. So that she didn't faint, and we had to like get her some water and pull her together. Basically, I managed to get a bit of color back into her face, and then I just pushed her down the aisle. We basically got her lined up with her dad, and as she was taking her first steps, I ran all the way around the side to the front to photograph her coming down the aisle. And thank God she took it slowly, because if she'd have run down the aisle, I'd have missed it all. I did not know if we were going to be picking her up off the floor at the front of the church or if she was going to make it all the way through. Number 5. This one was painful to watch because it's one of those things that you just don't ever want to have happen, and it was red wine on a wedding dress. So, the Toastmaster. I'm not a fan of Toastmasters. There are some incredible ones, but there also are some ones that aren't that great. But this one actually turned out to be quite a good one in the beginning. Anyways, he did this toast and this whole little toasty ceremony thing where he mixed the red wine and the white wine as part of like some kind of story towards to the toast. And he then set it on the table. Fine, no big deal. Probably about this much red and white wine mixed together. About an hour later, after all the speeches, one of the guests came over to say goodbye to the bride. And instead of going around the table to the back to say goodbye to the couple, they leant across the table to say goodbye to the couple. So the bride had gotten up, leaned forward, he had leaned forward, he knocked the wine glass over, the red wine went all down the front of her dress. 1 bottle of white wine later, poured over said dress, a little bit of bicarb of soda and a lot of water, and we managed to get probably 3/4 of it out of the dress. However, she then had to spend the rest of the evening walking around with this huge stain all down the front of her dress. And I mean, it was all down the front of her dress. Yeah, the moral of the story there is no red wine on the top table. Just don't do it. Cheesy smile at the end.